Hello, everybody. Happy Tuesday. It's Beyond 2D with one of your hosts right here, Jessica Dugas, creator of the Breakthrough Show Network, and my fabulous co-host.
Who said it was happy to be here today?
It's happy hour. Cheers.
Water.
Listen, I was saying before the show, this is a very, very nice mocktail we have going on here. And it's called I think it's called Wildflower, but I want to say Wallflower because that's what I'm going to be on the show tonight. This is my fabulous co-host.
Hey, Farron, Dozier, retired Army Sergeant First Class. Glad to be here to be quiet.
Listen, we can't both be quiet on today's show.
I got nothing to say.
Miss Brittany said happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. Where my fellas at?
See, if no one had shown up, then we could have been like, well, we could skip it. But Danielle's here too. So
hello, Danielle.
Cheers.
Hello, Danielle.
Cheers. We are this is now 3/4 of the way into our series on forgiveness and compassion, which I think has sparked some really beautiful, magical conversation. We have talked about the definition of forgiveness. We have talked about being and acting compassion as opposed to just saying we're going to be compassionate. And tonight, I need you to get this. This is what I need you to get. Okay. I need you to get yourself together. Get yourself together, first of all. Get a notebook, get a pen, get some tissues. Get some tissues because we are working through an episode we call tonight Bridges of Healing, which we're going to talk about the power of generational healing, exploring how forgiveness and compassion can mend and strengthen family bonds.
Yes. And
Farron has done a lot of work around this topic in the work that he does, and has not just done it and not just talked about it and taught it, but has activated those things in his own life in the relationships with both your parents and your children. Yes. As well. And I'm sort of smack in the middle of this like now. So I apologize ahead of time if I spend the next 55 minutes crying. I did not wear eye makeup today for a reason. But we're going to do this together, and I want y'all to stick with us tonight. Stick with us. We want to hear from you in the comments as always. And I'm going to let, what should we do first, Farron? How should we start this topic?
Just give me my cue and I'll go at it, and then you can just find your space in between.
Go.
All right. Again, thank you for listening to Beyond 2D today. As she mentioned, this conversation about forgiveness is something that is truly, truly, truly important to me because I had to go through this myself to get on this what we call healing journey, right? And a lot of times, we want people to come to us for forgiveness. They should come to me for forgiveness first. They should. I didn't do anything. Well, if you're not willing to tell the truth today to yourself, then you don't want to listen to this. You might well go chime into some other show. Today, I'm asking you to tell the truth to yourself, right? And I'm going to go take you on this journey real quick on how I had to discover this for myself around what we call interpersonal relationships. We look at interpersonal between each other, but what is that intrapersonal relationship between you and yourself first, right? And so we're going to talk about some self forgiveness, because when I started my journey on this self forgiveness, I had to look in my life and tell the truth about some stories that I had in my head that was my truth, but it wasn't the truth, right? And so again, you've got to be willing to tell the truth. And when I was in this space to tell the truth to myself, and I looked at the stories that I made up about my parents, starting with my dad, I had the story in my head that my dad didn't love me. And that story started at a 5-year-old child's perception of his father. And because my dad left that Christmas day, and I asked somebody in the room, now I'm 5 years old. I'm 5. Now you might have to look back further, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But if you think about how you feel about your dad or your mom, there's a story connected to that. There's an episode that floats around in your head that reminds you why they get on your nerve or why they don't like you, and or whatever that is for you. And in my head, I made up a story that my dad didn't love me. And it was from a 5-year-old decision because he left. It was Christmas. And I looked up and he was gone. And I said to the room, like, hey, where's my dad? And someone in the room said, oh, he left. And in that moment of a 5-year-old perception, oh, why did he leave? It's Christmas. This is a special day. Oh, he doesn't love me. That's why he left. And I played with my toys. Now, that was a core decision that I made towards my father, because if you understand child development and personal development, there are 3 things that we make up about ourselves. I'm on my own, there's something wrong here, and I don't belong. And each one of those that I've discovered for myself was a core decision around these 3 areas. And that first one was my dad. So I grew up with my father. I love my father, but he got on my nerve. He got on my nerve, right? And then there was some other things in the background between my mom and my dad that I wasn't told until I was 46 years old, right? So now you're talking about not seeing my father from age 7, age 8 until 15. So there's a 7-8 year gap that I didn't see my dad, which reinforced the decision that I made up about my dad, that he didn't love me, because he would call me and tell me he would come and see me, but he couldn't. I would get dressed, wait by the door, and he never showed.
Mm.
So that just reinforced. I had more evidence. Believe me, by the time I was 40 years old, I had enough evidence that my dad didn't love me.
Yeah.
How I treated him. And I treated him as such.
Right.
So up until 40 years old, when I took that story of that little child playing on the floor on Christmas, and I put my story up against these principles of there's something wrong, I don't belong, or there's something, I'm on my own. I saw that I actually made up a story about my dad. And when I told the truth to myself and set my story aside, I went to my father and I said, Dad, I love you. I appreciate you. Thank you for teaching me how to walk and color the Superman comic books and take me to McDonald's and camping on the beach. And also I discovered I made up a story about you. And this is a story. And he was like, son, I just wanted to spend time with you. You're,
Mm.
you're my only son. And in that moment, I told my father, instead of being upset and frustrated with you, I'm going to be acknowledgement, gratitude, joy, and fun.
Mm.
Because what I saw was my dad loved me the best he could with what he had,
Right.
right? And then I listened to my dad and how he told me about how he grew up. Then it was like, well, no wonder. It was like, no wonder he thought that there was some distance between him and his father.
Mm.
That his father could only take him a certain distance in life. So we all have these different stories. And again, it wasn't until 46 when my mom came into town. And I'm like, look, we need to all sit down because there's three different stories about what happened when I was born and growing up. And I'm tired. And so I brought them together and we sat and I made up the rules. You can't respond to what he says and you can't respond to what she says. Who wants to go first? And they each told their story about what happened when I was born.
Mm.
And guess what? The two different stories. He had this romantic story of why he wasn't there, and my mom was like, we wasn't even together. Like she had a whole nother story.
Mm-hmm.
And then it came up about why did I not see my dad for this period of time? Well, my mom and dad had a conversation outside of me, and my dad chose the ultimatum that he would just go deal with his lifestyle. So he couldn't see me because of the conversation that they had.
Right.
But
Right.
I found out at 46.
Right.
So yes, we can talk about saying I'm sorry. We can talk about apologizing, but the true essence of forgiveness is really saying, "Can you forgive me?" And so I
Mm.
went to my parents and I asked them to forgive me for my behavior towards them, on how I treated them because I was an adult
Right.
and I could take responsibility for my actions and my behavior and the compassion that I had after discovering the stories that I made up about my life and about who they were. I could only imagine what they were dealing with to have a child when they were 19 and 20 years old.
Right. I want to pause your story because I think so many people can relate to what you're talking about. Of I think let us know in the comments if you've ever sat and had any of these thoughts for yourself of um what are the stories that I've made up? And I know for myself, I had a very similar story. You and I have talked about this off camera about my father, and he was in the military. There was a lot of things like I couldn't see him for a very good reason. He was off fighting things,
Yeah.
under the sea, and all of that, and there were a lot of times that I couldn't see him, but I had convinced myself that he just didn't want to see me.
Mm-hmm.
And so and so what I want to kind of ask in this moment is if you forgiving yourself, apologizing for your behavior, being the adult that you are now,
Mm-hmm.
does that erase things that had been done to you, like that maybe were valid, like maybe something had been done that was like, that maybe they could have chosen something different
Yeah,
at
for
the
sure.
time? Does it erase it for you, or is it like a choice not to allow that to be the memory that now determines your adult behavior?
For my mom and my dad's relationship of that healing of forgiveness, it literally turned those stories that I made up because my stories were not the truth. So I had nothing to say that, oh, yes, this was the truth. This was valid. Yes, you did this. No, because I could honestly tell myself in my own self forgiveness of making up those stories about them that it was all made up. And so the compassion that comes from the self forgiveness of me forgiving myself for making up those stories, that also flows over to the parents of allowing them to have that compassion and then listen to their stories of how it was for them growing up. So it literally, yes, I still can frame those things to be negative, but when I honestly tell the truth, they all disappear to just my experiences of my life. And now they get to be a testimony of how corrupted a thought of a 5-year-old can have on a person for 35 years, thinking that my dad doesn't love me.
So I think ultimately, like, it was a decision from how I can hear from my perspective. It was a decision that you had to make to go, I'm not going, that's not the thought that I'm going to have. That's not the thing that I'm going to focus on. That it was a decision that you made to not allow that to be the memory or the focus or that part of the relationship, to choose to erase that is really interesting, in that from how I can see, a child's basic needs of needing to feel taken care of, and you didn't feel those things, I don't necessarily feel like it was some sort of outlandish thing for you to make up that story. Like, I don't think that that was outside of anything that a child of 5 years old would do when they feel abandoned.
Of course.
And so I think that forgiveness of yourself is also, for me, as I've thought about it from my own perspective and what I dealt with, is also, um it's a different kind of forgiveness for me, because it's forgiveness, yes, but it's also an awareness of, instead of going, well, I forgive you, Jessica, for having those thoughts about your parents because that was bad. It wasn't that.
Mm-mm.
It was I forgive myself um for responding in the way, for being mad at myself for responding in a way that a child would respond,
Yeah.
or thinking there was something wrong with me
Yeah.
in the process as well. And it didn't erase for me um the things that I thought about in that way, but it does allow me to now, as an adult, take responsibility and choose how I'm going to interact with my mom and dad. Because I can sit here and be like, well, Dad, you were on Farron's show
Mm-hmm.
and you were talking about how you love traveling with your kids. When do I get to be one of those?
Mm-hmm.
And then be like, well, you can't come and hang out with your grandkids. You can. I
Yeah.
could sit here and I could be mad about it, or I can just be like, look, I know we still have stuff that we need to work on, and but I'm not going to let that be my focus, because I'm an adult now. At some point I have to go, okay, like, I may have felt abandoned as a child. I may still feel at times abandoned as an adult child,
Mm-hmm.
but I get to now choose the way I respond. I get to choose what I get to spend my energy on and how I spend that energy.
So this process of this forgiveness wasn't just overnight. First I had to find an education principles to put that story up against. So you have to go and find something outside of your own thought process on how you reconcile your issues with yourself up against some principles that are out in the world that you can challenge, like cognitive behavior. Like that's why therapy and personal development courses, even child development courses, if you really put your life in those child development courses and personal development and those principles of the therapeutic sessions, you will discover that how the brain functions, how the limbic system functions, and how short-term memory is exaggerated and the stories that gets down. I mean, if you when you can get that knowledge and understanding and revelation, and then you apply it, you will then see that you cannot start to tell the truth to yourself, and then you have to challenge those stories and those thoughts. Are those thoughts real, or were they exaggerated? Are those thoughts happening today, or is that from the past? So it wasn't an overnight sensation. That was 8 years with my dad of constant, because the commitment that I made to my dad when I discovered that at 40 was, I'm no longer going to be upset and frustrated with my dad, because that's how I saw my behavior. Who was I being with my father? Not what I was doing with my father, but who was I being? And I could tell you, I was being upset, frustrated, disappointed, angry. Like I treated my father very bad in how I talked to him and how I treated him. And that's what I took responsibility for, because he didn't deserve that. That was my behavior towards him. He only
Yeah.
loved me the how he knew how. And when I told that truth to myself and to my father, I made a commitment to him. I gave him my word on who I'm going to be with you, Dad. His acknowledgement, gratitude, joy, and fun. So every time he would say what he did or do what he would do, of course, my body and my thoughts still reared up, and I was like,
Right.
inside. But I remembered, who did I say I was going to be with my father? Because
Mm,
I asked him to forgive me for my behavior. So I had to remind myself, who did I say? Right. So yeah, maybe sometimes I went off the handle, and then I caught myself. Okay, Dad, you know what? Please forgive me. I didn't mean to say that to you like that. That's that old stuff, and so please. But that was a process of me practicing being
right.
forgiveness
Who
and
do
being
you
that.
want to be? Who do you want to be? I mean, we talk about in the personal development world all the time, like taking your power back, being in your power, being in
Yes.
your own control, the master of your own emotions, all of these things. What a beautiful way to do that. And to, I say all the time, like when my older kids like start to really like like really freaking
Yes.
out, I'm like, you're giving your power away to that person by reacting the way that you're reacting.
Yes.
And even my husband and I have had this conversation because he tends to be he my husband is much more confrontational than I am. Like, he has no problem getting in there
Right.
and getting it done, and I'm like, oh, we probably don't want to do that. We probably don't want to react in that way. But I'm like, when you get mad and you get all upset, like, you're giving your power away to that person.
Yeah.
Take it back by going like, I'm gonna be calm in this. Who do I want to be?
Yes.
It's hard for me because I feel like I have a hard time sleeping at night, even if I say something to someone in response that's like an angry response because they were angry with me. I still don't feel good about that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't feel good at the end of the day about those things. And so, even though I am a little bit more passive, like, I do really recognize the value in being in control of your own stuff, and how do you want to show up and how do you want to act with things, which I think is a great way to do. And I think I would want to say, and you let me know how you feel about this, like, that doesn't take away, like, it doesn't dishonor what you went through to now
No,
being your own power.
no. Like I said, if you're willing to tell the truth about your contribution to that behavior, then the blame disappears. There's no one to blame, right? And and in that space, that's where love is present, and the love for yourself returns, and the love for that person or your family because again, if the two most people in your life are your parents, and you have a broken relationship with your parents, how do you expect to have a relationship with any other person in life?
Mm,
Because you're going to carry that story into that next relationship. So the core of our healing and forgiveness is with our parents. Those are the first two most important people in our life, is our parents,
mm,
whether they were there or not there. And so when you talk about it spiritually, forgiveness is a key. It's a principle in forgiveness with biblically. But
mm.
also it talks about honor your father and mother. Now, again, there
I
are
have a
some,
good story.
this is biblically, there are some fathers and mothers that aren't parents, right? Because the Bible says honor your father and mother and obey your parent. Well, guess what? Your parent could be your aunt, uncle, grandmother, whoever raised you, because the parent sources the child not just financially or physically, but emotionally. So sometimes there are fathers and mothers who don't know how to be a parent. And that's not their fault, because if you then take a look at how they grew up and what their parents went through, then you could see, well, no wonder you don't know, because you don't even have that in you, because you're missing that for yourself.
Mm,
So when you tell the truth and you can look back and self-examine and then look at how your parent and put yourself in their situation, you're like, well, no wonder, Dad, no wonder, Mom, it wasn't you the person, it was the behavior. But it wasn't,
mm.
so I'm forgiving the person and the behavior in forgiveness.
Yeah.
So the stories disappeared, and my parents never changed.
Yeah.
I changed who I was being with them. They still do what they do, they still did what they did, my mom still does what she does. But who am I going to be? Like you said, who am I going to be to get my power, to have my strength, to have my
Mm,
confidence and courage, but to really listen? How can you listen to someone when there's that story in the background? Well, I'm listening to you, but but he doesn't love me. He's just doing that. Like I did my dad. He's just doing that because he's making up for. for lost time. Oh, you just
Mm,
buy me those clothes because you didn't give no child support. Like that was the
yeah.
stories that I would reference to my dad, who's giving me his love, who's showing me his love, who's being love.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that wasn't him. It was me.
I remember at one point that verse from the Bible came up during a time when I was going to a church, and I felt some kind of way about it because I was really sort of in the depths of my own head with the relationship with my parents, and also around a time when I lost my grandparents who had a big hand in raising me. So oftentimes looking back, I really considered them to be parental figures for me. And so I remember I'm like, how can you when there's like real wrongs, and I'm not going to list things, but when I say real wrongs, I think a lot of you can understand what I mean. In a relationship, like if there's abuse present, if there's like really, I'm not talking about like, didn't take you to the mall when you wanted to go, and that's not what I'm
Yeah.
talking about here. I'm talking about real hard abuse, things like that. Okay. So I went to the pastor at the time, and I was like, I I don't know about this honor your father and mother thing, because there's some real things here. There's
Yeah.
some real things here. And he told me, this is where my freedom in this came from, that is talking about honoring the title of.
Mm-hmm.
Honoring the title of. It doesn't erase when they don't know how to be a parent. It
Mm-mm.
doesn't erase when they do sometimes horrendous and awful things. It's the
Mm-hmm.
title of. It is a gratitude and respect for
Mm-hmm.
where you came from, and then it's your choice. So that's where, like, that was the day for me when I was like, oh,
Yes. And when I got that revelation for myself in this healing journey with my parents, it was about how you think about them. We don't love our parents every day. We don't love each other. I don't even love myself every day. So when you start to tell the truth about these words that we use and we describe and how we report on our emotions to one another, when it said honor, the revelation I got was it's about your heart. How do you think about them? And if you think about them with upset and frustration and bitterness and anger, then guess what's going to be your behavior toward them? So honoring your father and mother is that esteem, the acknowledgement of them. It doesn't, like I said, honor your father and mother and obey your parents. And sometimes a father and mother are not parents, and that's the truth. But because they're not parents doesn't mean they're not bad. They're bad people. Then you have to look and see how were they raised. What was going on when their parents had them? What was going on with their grandparents and like when you start to look at the experiences and how those generational consequences get passed down, then you're like, oh, no wonder. It makes sense. And in that space of making sense, I choose to be angry or choose to be free.
right.
And I have that choice.
Yeah.
And that's
It
having
doesn't
your
mean
power back.
it doesn't mean it's not gonna creep up every now and then. It's not gonna, like you talked about with your dad, how like occasionally you would respond a
Oh,
certain way and
yeah,
then be like, "Oops, didn't
for
mean it."
sure.
That's not who I told myself I was not gonna be like that, and so it's every time I think it comes up for me. Like I mentioned, I had a couple really real moments when my dad was on your show,
Hmm.
and listening to him talk and having, there was a lot. There was
Hmm.
a lot there. For it took me a couple days to really like process that. And I don't know when we'll get to. My dad actually going to be here in a couple days for Nina's graduation, and it's a shorter visit. So I'm not sure how much time we'll have to actually talk. But we've been sort of unpacking stuff every time he kind of comes around, again, and learning new things, and sometimes it's just an awareness. It's an awareness and going like, that wasn't necessarily right, and it didn't really feel good, but I want you to know how I felt about it, and now
See,
I'm going to choose to move on.
you're like my middle daughter. So when I did this with my parents, I'll say that for the other half, but when I did this with my parents, I then saw that I had to go do this with my daughters because I treated them the same version of how my parents treated me growing up. And so I learned from my dad how to be a dad, which was not around a great percentage of the time. So I remember making those decisions as a young father. Well, I'll deal with them when they grow up. That was the worst decision that I could have made to myself, to deal with when they grow up. Right?
Yeah.
But the thing about it is when I started the forgiveness process with my parents and my dad, it went from me being mad at my dad for 2 weeks to maybe a week.
Yeah.
And then maybe 5 days. And then maybe 2 days. And then it got down to like maybe 10 minutes. And before he passed, it was like 2 minutes. Because I remember the last episode that we had before he passed away, I called him and I was upset about something in my own life. And I was like, where you at? I'm with my sister. Oh, what are you doing over there? Like, he's just, and I'm frustrated. And I'm like, all right, man, I'll call you later. And I hang up the phone and I'm driving home and I'm like, what are you doing, bro? That's not, you just took that on him and he has nothing to do with what you're dealing with. I called him right back. Hey, Dad, you know what, man? Please forgive me. I'm dealing with something. I wanted to talk to you, but I see you with your sister, so I don't want to interrupt that. So I'll catch up with you later. But I recognize that because how you said how I felt up against my commitment to my parents and to myself. That was not who I said I wanted to be anymore. I don't want to be frustrated with my dad no more. I was conscious of that. I was aware.
Yeah.
And I caught it. And I'm like, oh, shoot, you're getting good at this. You know, it's not mastered, but hey, it went from 2 years sometimes to not talking to my father to 2 minutes. And you have to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
That's work. Like that's huge. Because I could have at least easily hung up the phone with him and been mad. Like it was something he did to me.
Right. Right.
From the old stories that show up.
Yeah.
But it's the commitment. It's the commitment on who you say you get to be for your loved ones, for your children, regardless of their behavior. Because we're all dealing with something. And I can tell you truly, I broke those chains, those generational consequences. I broke those with my parents for myself to be free. And then I went to my children and allowed that same conversation. We'll talk about that in the second half. That's the children's side of it.
We're gonna take some real responsibility in the next half of the show, and I think I would segue into our break really quick by saying if we recognize that our responses are based on the behavior of other people, we have some real work to do. Real hard work to do. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
It's the stories. Let the stories go. Challenge the stories. They're not the truth. They're your truth, but they're not the truth. Find out what the truth is.
Absolutely. It's awfully quiet out there in the audience this evening. Chime in the comments on the break. Tell us how you're feeling right now. If it's heavy, we want to know that too, because we could break this down some more another time. Too. Tell us how you're feeling. Okay. And we'll be right back after this.
Hey, what's up, man? How you doing?
I'm blessed, my brother. How you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Hey, did you see the game last night?
Oh, that was a good game.
But did you see the shot?
I lost money from that shot.
Oh, man, that shot was cold, man.
I hated it, but it was good. Damn. What's in those jeans?
You really want to know?
I do.
Exhaustion, muscle spasms, asthmatic issues, unexpected sickle cell trait crises.
Damn, are you serious? When I was young, I found out I had sickle cell trait. My mom's told me, but I didn't have no knowledge of it. But when I got older, I had a child, and the doctor told me my daughter has sickle cell trait. Do you know the facts that both parents have sickle cell trait? There's a 50% chance the child may have the trait, and 25% chance the child may have the disease.
Hey, that's what's the count. Do you know that 2.5 million people in the United States have sickle cell trait, 300 million people globally? I didn't find out I had sickle cell trait until I was in the Army 10 years.
Next thing you know, I had a sickle cell trait exertion site.
Sickle cell. I thought that was a black gene or something.
Nah, man, the Latin community is number 2. 1 out of 36,000 babies are being born with sickle cell disease. You could be Caucasian, Mediterranean, European. You gotta know your bloodline, man. There is an inherited gene in our community that has been forgotten. The name is sickle cell trait. WDCONSCT, also known as What's the Count, is out to bring awareness, education, and prevention to people all over the globe. Want more information? Call us now at 323-215-5384 or visit www.wdconsct.org.
Welcome back to Beyond 2D. It is officially Tuesday, May 14th, 2024. We are three quarters of the way through our Forgiveness and Compassion series. Tonight, we are talking about bridges of healing, talking about healing that generational trauma within families, exploring how forgiveness and compassion can mend and strengthen family bonds. Before the break, Farron and I were both talking about, that sort of forgiveness and compassion that had to happen with our parents. And so we're going to kind of flip the switch a little bit this next half and talk about how that's been for us with our children. And I will be passing this on. Will you pass this episode on to your kids?
Of course.
Yeah, I'm gonna do the same. I'm gonna do the same.
Because my youngest daughter is dealing with this right now. My youngest daughter, right, with her mom, she's dealing with this right now. She discovered where it's coming from, but she lets her mom's words like shoot darts, like they're painful words, and what she makes it mean about herself, it's defeating her self-confidence and her own self-love and self-esteem. Yeah. But I know where it's coming from, and I can show her where to look, but I can't do the work for her.
She's got to do it herself.
She's got to do it herself, and I've offered her up the same tools, the same biblical everything, to figure that out for herself.
Brittany says she's gardening while the show's on tonight. I don't have to think about all this. And I love what Danielle said. I just want to talk about this really quick. I think as far as memories go, it's all perspective. What I perceived happen in a situation may not be what the other person perceived happen. What seemed like a pivotal moment for me may not have been important to the other person. And we see this often, actually. I've talked about this before with siblings. So you might have a siblings in a family who both maybe survived abuse situations with their parents, and one person is like thriving to use that situation to sort of move forward, and the other one took it processed it very differently, and it maybe is having a harder time. And so you see that, you think like, oh, they came from the same household, so they're going to be the same way. But we see that often with siblings, where they process their perspectives of things, and how the stories, like you talked about, they made up about those things, are very different from one another.
Your perception, your interpretation, and your perspective. You have to be aware of what's driving those principles that you're using, because we're used by those principles. And they're usually from an upset or a disappointment or a diminished experience of ourselves. And so we use those to protect ourselves. But before I hit my children, example with my mom. Now I healed with my mom just about 2.5 years ago completely. But there was a point there my mom would, when we talk on the phone, we would start off so lovely and nice. Oh, hi, mom. Hi, son. Oh, this. And then a subject comes up. Maybe I bring up a subject, and now our tones get higher and higher. And now we're yelling at each other on the phone. And we used to just, she'll hang up on me, and I'd be like, what? And I call her back, and maybe she might not take my call for like a week or so, because she doesn't want to deal with me.
Yeah.
Right. And so I was in Georgia, me and my siblings, and my sister said, Mom, why you holler? Why you hollering? And she's in the kitchen cooking, and it's like, and so I thought like, yeah, she does holler. So I'm back home, we're on the phone, and we do one of those episodes again where it goes from nice to hollering on the phone at each other. And I remembered, hey, Mom, why do you holler? Why do you holler when you talk? Like, why are you hollering? She says, you know what, son? I'm passionate about what I'm saying to you, and I want you to hear me.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I kid you not, and when in that moment listening to my mother say that to me,
Mm.
I could no longer say she hollers because her voice now, when it goes up to that high level, to me, it now means doesn't mean that she's hollering anymore. It means I need to listen because she's saying something that's important and she wants me to hear her. She wants
Yeah.
to be heard.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I got that and I started practicing allowing her when both of our voices go high on the phone. Okay, mom, go ahead. Go ahead.
Literally any conversation in an Italian family. Literally all of us do.
Yes.
All of us do it all
Yes.
the time. And
But
it's
where
so
is it
funny,
coming
like
from? It's
all
usually
is
coming from love and I
yeah,
want to be
we're just
heard.
real passionate about
Yes.
what when we talk with our hands and we're all in your face and everything else. But when other people come into that conversation, they're like, "Good Lord, that's hot."
Exactly.
And I'm like,
Exactly.
we're just real excited.
So from that moment, that helped the transformation of my relationship with my mother. I had to do a little bit more work, but just that one thought of
Yeah.
listening to her from hollering went from no, she's passionate. So I
Yeah.
practiced listening to her from her passion when she talks to me, so I could hear what she needs to say.
I love
simple.
that. I love that.
So
Yeah.
with my daughters, when I did this process, I have 3 daughters. I went to each daughter and I said, "Hey, you know what? I'm gonna give you the space that I need to know what's on your heart. Like what do you think about me? Like how do you feel about me?" And I gave her I gave them the framework. I'm not gonna defend myself in what you say. I'm not gonna rebuttal. I'm not gonna do. I'm just gonna. I want you to say what's on your mind. My oldest daughter, she said what was on her mind. I said, "Thank you." I said, "Can you? All I can ask you from today as your father, can you forgive me?" She says, "I forgive you, Dad, but I'll talk to you when I want to, on my terms." And I accepted that because forgiveness doesn't mean that that person is going to continue to be in communication with you. They now have that opportunity. So my daughter has to now, my oldest daughter, she has to figure that out for herself. But she cannot say that I did not ask for forgiveness for however she felt about me for all those years. That was my oldest. My middle daughter, Brittany, was like you. She cursed at me for 1 hour and 45 minutes. And all I said was, "Is there anything else?" And you could see her look in her head. "Oh yeah, and this one time you did this and you wasn't there for me." And I'm like, "Okay, anything else?" "Oh yeah, and you and 1 hour and 45 minutes. And when we were done, I said, "Is there anything else?" She was like, "No, I think that's it." I'm like, "Are you sure?" And you can see her like, "No, I think I said what I need. I think I've said everything I need to say." So I said, "So based off what you said, I'm not going to defend it. I'm not going to try to make any kind of corrections about it. I'm asking you as your father today, can you forgive me and give me an opportunity to be in your life and be a parent? Because I wasn't a parent. I was a father. Can you allow me today to be your father and your parent?" And she said, "Yes, Dad." Today, you would never think of how she felt about me for those years that I missed out up until how she is. She's 20 and she's about to be 30 this year. And you couldn't tell, and she'll tell you herself how it was before, during, and after our forgiveness conversation. And then what that did was in that space for her, when she took the education that we all took, she had a moment in her education development, personal development, and she calls me on the phone and says, "Dad, what was going on when I was born?" I said, "Oh, so now you're ready for me to tell my side of the story."
Yeah.
And I told her, "Girl, I was lost. I was 23 years old when you was born. I did not know what I was doing. And I told where I was." And she was like you. She was like, "Well, Dad, you was in the military, so you couldn't be around. But I made it mean that you didn't care because you wasn't around, but you was in the military." And so, like I said, when she did that, it was done.
Yeah.
It was done. Now she still tested me on some stuff, right? Because it doesn't just go away instantly.
Right.
And I stepped up and I kept my word. And she was like, "Oh, I didn't think you was gonna do that. I wasn't expecting you to show up. I wasn't expecting." And I'm like, "Oh, like no, this is who I said I'm gonna be. Like I made the commitment."
Right.
And
Right.
and then those spaces is practice. You've got to allow That forgiveness is a moment by moment phenomenon. It's not you
Mm-hmm.
do it one time and it's there forever. No, you have to remember you forgave that person. You have to remind yourself that if they come at you with some of that old conversation that you took responsibility for, you have to remind yourself first, oh yeah, I asked him for forgiveness. So what is it about that you're still carrying that?
Right.
What is that
Right.
that for you that's just there's something else connected to that? Because see, I sat with my children until they were emptied. A lot of times we ask for forgiveness in passing, and there's like 10 years of stuff that's still connected to
Yep.
on top of layer to layer to layer those stories where the upsets come from. But I made sure that in this space that I have with my daughters, they emptied their brain in front of me. So when they
Yeah.
walked away from me, the forgiveness that I got, I saw that they had nothing else in their mind that they could pull from. Some of the stuff my daughter brought up was like, I don't even know what the heck that was. Some of it made, oh, I could see why you would think that. So I had
Mm-hmm.
to then look self-examine about my behavior toward that. And like, okay, I could see, yeah, I could be a jerk.
Yeah.
I did do that. I could say that. Some of this stuff, I don't even know what she was talking about. But that was her reality, her perception, her interpretation, her perspective. And I acknowledge that.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
okay, that's your view. I get that.
Now have I think one of the things that's challenging, whether we're dealing with family, friends, whatever the situation, is when one or more parties can't grasp that perspective part. When they can't, when it's like this is what happened and this is the truth, period, end of story,
Mm-hmm.
and not understanding that there's many perspectives of that same truth. It's not to say this isn't a truth. This isn't not. It's not erasing it. It's not saying it didn't happen. But it's this. I think in order to continue a relationship, there has to be that dance between both parties where they're willing to understand that they each have their own perspective, and that doesn't erase, it doesn't make it not exist, but there's different ways that it was processed. And I think sometimes when we point out that other perspective, it can be challenging, because it's like, no, this is the truth. This is what happening. We're not saying that's not the truth
Yes.
with our kids. I'm not saying that my kids don't feel a certain kind of way.
Yes.
What I am saying is, I feel for you and what you've experienced. It was not my experience. I processed that very, very differently, but I honor you for your experience at the same time. But in order for, like, it needs to be that
But see,
that two-way thing.
Here's the one thing about the Bible says how many times are you supposed to forgive? 70 times 7 or something like
Mm-hmm.
some number that never really ends,
Yep.
right? The thing about it is when I say, and as I started this conversation, if you're not willing to tell the truth about your behavior in these conversations, withholding communication is communication,
Mm.
right? So at the relationship of this thing that it burst up into flames, could I then use the umbrella of forgiveness and look back and say, well, you know what? Maybe I did say something one day to you that I said on purpose because I knew it was going to get you
Right.
onto a rocker, and I could take responsibility for that.
Yep.
Or maybe I didn't say something that I should have said and I didn't say it, and I can acknowledge that. When you can tell that truth about that umbrella of forgiveness on your part, because we're not perfect, and their story is their story. Maybe I did
100%.
maybe I did do something that I'm not even aware of,
Right.
that I said to you in a moment that you've added this to this. So guess what? I'm gonna ask you, can you forgive me for all of it? Like communion Sunday, bread and wine. Hey, forgive me for anything I've done to you.
Mm. Yeah.
And if you do that and they don't accept that forgiveness, you have planted that seed of forgiveness, and they can no longer say, oh well, he didn't he no he asked me for forgiveness. And if they tell the truth about that interaction, well, how did
Right.
it go? How did it go with Farron? Oh, I can only imagine what my oldest daughter said. How did it go with your dad? Oh, we settled it. But he asked me for forgiveness. Well, what did you say? I told him I forgive him about. Oh, wow, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you plant that seed of forgiveness, that allows that other person to at some point look in their life, because it doesn't mean that you're going to have a harmonious relationship.
Right.
Now you got to deal with the consequences of whatever that misunderstanding or issue is. And
Right.
I call people at 40 years old, I call ex-girlfriends, who could I think of that I needed to talk to ask for forgiveness?
Mm.
And I had a lot of my old friends say, "Hey, I know you was crazy. Don't call me no more. I forgive you, but don't call me no more. Like, why are you calling me, Farron? There's nothing wrong." Like, I
Mm.
had a whole spectrum of
Yes.
calling people in my phone to ask them to forgive me for my
Yes.
behavior.
Yep. Listen, last year, or actually, gosh, oh my gosh, it's been more than a year. It's been more than a year now. I'm used to telling this story in like last year. Nope, it's been like a year and a half now. But Danielle, by the way, who's gonna tell her husband about some of this, and then maybe he'll about the raising of the voice, the raising of the voice thing. She's just passionate, Miguel. You hear me? She's just passionate. Now you go get that goat, and it'll be just fine. So anyway, Danielle came over, and she and I knew each other since kindergarten. Like we go way back. And but in school, we knew each other, but we weren't really close.
Mhm.
And when she and her husband came over, when we moved back up here, they came over one night. I was doing these things where I literally every Friday I said, my door is open, and if you'd like to come over, come over. I just
Yeah.
anybody just come on. And Danielle and Miguel came one night, and I brought out some old school pictures. I brought out like our DARE graduation and like some choir pictures, like some old stuff. And we, through conversation that night, we discovered that we each had some thoughts about each other back then. Like, cause I was trying to process, I'm like, we lived in the same neighborhood, which was a pretty, that makes for a next, that's more than just going to school together. You're in the same hood together. Right.
Yeah.
So like, why weren't we more close than what we were? And so as we sat there and discussed this, we realized that we had some different thoughts about each other. Like there was some jealousy. There were some notions about why the other one behaved the way that they did. There was a lot of these thoughts, and we were like, well, that's from my perspective, I would have never thought that you would have thought that. And we kind of had this, and Danielle and I are best friends now.
Yes.
It's a really cool experience. And so that's because we were both willing to sit at that table and talk about it.
Talk about and listen to the other person's experience without judgment, without defending yourself in the conversation. That's the difference. To be in that space, it has to be, both parties have to be willing to be in that space. Because if I come to you and you're not willing to listen to me to forgiveness, then I'm going to drop the seed, but then it's still up to you now. And it may take you another 5 years to let that seed water and grow, to realize that, oh man, maybe my behavior was a part of that.
It only takes, like, as I'm listening to this part of the conversation, it only takes one person to forgive.
Yes.
It only takes one person to forgive, to continue a relationship, to nurture a relationship, to move to the next level. That takes an energy from both parties.
Yeah. And you got to be willing to be okay when that person says, like my daughter, who I would, if she called me right now, I'd pick up the phone.
Yeah.
To say, hey, I forgive you, but I'll talk to you on my terms. Do you know how that hurts? That hurts.
Yeah.
I love her, but the ball is in her court now, and she has to look in the mirror every morning and figure out why she doesn't want to talk to me when I try to reach out to her.
Yeah.
That's no longer my burden. That's no longer my carry. I own the responsibility. I've owned all of it, and I've asked her for forgiveness.
Yeah.
We have people in our churches praying for their child, for that relationship to be restored. Praying. But that's not what forgiveness is. The forgiveness frees your heart, and it gives that other person an opportunity to self-examine themselves at some point of their life. And that sibling. See, now we talk about the family. Um, there's a love. Our English language is so terrible. We use the word love for I love my dog, my car, my cat, my phone, my laptop, my wife, like girlfriend, like we love. But in Hebrews, I believe, or Greek, there's storge love. And
Yeah.
storge love is when you say I storge you, people know that you're talking about your family or your siblings love.
Mm,
And when you look at storge love, it comes with an experience of obligation
mm,
attached to storge because it's your family. Well, yes, your family are there for the hard times. That's why we come together when there's funerals or things are chaotic. A family can put all the differences aside for that day and come together and fellowship and be as a family because there is a sense of obligation in that parental family dynamic of love. And when you understand that, to get that friendship love, you've got to take some extra work. It takes extra work to transform that relationship with your sibling into a friendship love. But
yeah.
someone has to take that responsibility in that relationship to be that friendship person to create the space. And I had to do that with my own siblings. They were all in Georgia with my mom, and I'm the only one not there. And I'm like, I'm buying my ticket. And my mom was like,
Yeah.
I heard my mom in the background. He ain't coming out here.
Uh-oh.
Mm-hmm.
She was trying to hold you to who you
She was
were.
like, and
Yep.
so
Mm-hmm.
I literally bought my ticket. I flew out there, and I told my siblings, my sisters, like we have to create this relationship between us beyond just brother and sister.
Mm,
If we want to spend time with each other, we have to create that. We have to be that and create. And the more that you practice that and develop that relationship as friends, it grows, and the obligation disappears. But there's still a sense of obligation when it comes to your siblings and your parents. There's like
mm,
you feel obligated to be there because yes, that's part of that family love. Yes, you got to go out in the world, create your own friends too. That's why people say I hate that term too. Friends become family or some there's some little cliche, blood thicker than water. Like they have all
mm-hmm.
these things. Like it hurts me when people say that because you can hear that they're not connected to their own family,
Mm,
and that
yeah.
hurts because
Yeah.
that's our family. We want that love. We want that connection with our family naturally. But like you said, we grew up in the same house and we got three different views of our mother.
Yeah. Brittany was saying before, my brother's truth is so different than my truth, and we was raised in the same house.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you understand, if you know that and you understand that and then you live from that, then you don't get mad with your brothers and sisters. There's
Yeah.
space to be loved with them and ask questions. Well, why do you look at mom like that? Why do you think mom is like that? Well, guess what? Mom always
Mm,
told me to get a jacket before I left the house, and she's still telling me at 40 years old because that's how your mom shows love to you, that she cares about you. Get your jacket before you
right.
leave. Mom, I'm 30 years old. Why you tell me I'm not cold? But that's her expression
Right.
of love, and we can't even receive that because how we think about our parents.
Right. Right.
So you can't even
Right.
receive the natural love for one another with all the stories in the way. But I love you. But in the
Yeah.
back of my mind, you get on my nerve because that
Right.
one time you did this to me, and I'm holding on to that. But
Yeah.
I don't never say nothing to you about that.
Yeah.
It,
Yeah.
it's if you look in the world today beyond 2D, it's destroying our relations with our families
Mm,
at its core. How
yeah.
can you have a relationship with another person when you can't even have a relationship with your own parents, especially how you think about them?
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't work.
I know that we only have a couple minutes left here, and I want to give a little bit of time for each of us to say anything that might be on your mind to say, whether it's to your parents, to your children, to your family as a whole. I want to give us a moment to publicly say what we want to say to our own families. Do you want to start?
Yeah. Like I said, I've settled in my heart for my daughter Jade. But if you ever watch this, I love you so much, and I miss talking to you. I miss the opportunity to establish a relationship. You are no different than I am. I had to do this same work, but you know that I ask for forgiveness. I just want you to know that I still love you. And if you ever call me, I will pick up the phone no matter where I'm at, no matter what I'm doing. If I see your name show up, I will always answer your phone call. Always.
Mm, I love that. I love that. I'm getting emotional over here already, and I haven't even said anything. I haven't said anything. Oh gosh, there. I feel like I need a whole show to say everything that I really want to say, and that is on my heart to say, because my processing of a lot of these things are a little more fresh in my mind than they are for you. However, um, with my parents, I really am working on processing through those stories that I made up for how putting words in your mouths for how you felt about me. And I really do take responsibility for that, and also forgiving little Jessica for feeling like those thoughts were wrong, because she was just little and she just wanted to be loved and held and included and thought of in a special kind of way. And with my kids, I still have younger ones at home, some of them younger and then some of them not here anymore, moved away and living their lives and all of that. And my hope is that we can have those table conversations, and that you can be honest with me. And some of you have heard recently, about me speaking in a different way. And I have to thank Farron and this show for that, for allowing me to be calm, ask questions, be loving and all of that as we have these hard conversations. So I love you all so very much, all 6 of my amazing children. I love you more than I can even express in words. And I'm always open and willing to have those conversations with you, the hard ones, and listen. And I also want to say to one of the things that as we talked about siblings, many of you know that I lost my brother Adam, and it's I'm having a moment here. I'm sorry, because there is literally a bee just floating in my room, so I'm a little distracted. But my brothers, Adam passed away, but I do have 2 other brothers, Gregory and Sean, who are my dad and my stepmom's boys, and we have never been very close. And I really would like for that to change. I really would like for us to talk. I would like for us to have more of a relationship. And I do want you to know that even though we haven't had that relationship, that I love you and I see all the amazing things you're doing. And I do want that for us. So that's as short as I can keep it for this evening.
And it's beautiful you say that, because my mom, me and my sister we all have different fathers, right? And I followed in my mom's footsteps. My children have different mothers, but me and my siblings, we don't treat each other as such. Like we're brothers and sisters, regardless if we have different dads. And it's beautiful that you say that, because that whole family dynamic of having a stepfather and stepbrothers and sisters, again, it takes extra work. It takes a level of commitment to establish those relationships. We think that child, we put them together and they should just play together and everything should be fine. No, you have to really sit down with those children and create the space for them to interact and to hear one another, because you have their idea, especially when it's a divorce. The children make it mean something about them a great percentage of the time, of why those marriages fail. And then we carry that. And then you want me to be a part of this family. And it's like, so you've got to find something outside of your own thought process to challenge your life up against. outside of your mind, because you're going to always be right. You're going to always be right about the people in your life. And they can never call you enough. They can never say thank you enough. If that's what you're counting and holding on to, that they don't say thank you, that they don't say this, I'm waiting for them to call me first. The last thing you want something to happen is that person passes away. Are you really going to be okay with that? If that person passes away and you're holding that unforgiveness, that's why reconciliation is so important. That's why forgiveness is so important, because just planting that seed is enough to possibly restore that relationship.
Absolutely.
You have no idea. They may be waiting for you. Your mom and dad might be waiting to hear you say, "Hey, mom, dad, guess what? You did a great job, and my life turned out. Thank you for providing everything for me." But what do? We go to our parents and complain about the stuff that we don't have, and we just dump on them the negative stuff. Have you ever told your parents thank you? Hey, you did a good job, mom and dad. That might be the only thing that they need to hear, that they've never heard from a child.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So listen, we have one more thing to do with it. I'm freaking out over this damn thing. We have one more week to do. One more week to do with this topic. Next episode, we're going to be talking about beyond ourselves, how forgiveness can transform the world, the ripple of effect that forgiveness can have. And we're going to talk about that on the next episode in 2 weeks. Thanks so much for being here today. We appreciate you. I'm your host, Jessica Dugas. This is my fabulous co-host, Farron Dozier, and we will be back in 2 weeks for another episode of Beyond 2D. We'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.